echad. Va'or yom, la'or yom, ve'lachoshek, kara. Oh, you guys can't see my cursor. Kara la ilah. Vayehi, notice your method there, so that's an open syllable. Vayehi erev, vayehi boker, or voker, I guess you would say. Yom echad. All right. So who wants to read it for us? I hope you read it a lot better than I do. I've never been great at reading out loud, but he'll read for us. Maybe get one or two people to read through that. It'll help all of us with our pronunciation.
I'll start it.
Very good.
All right. Bereshit bara Elohim et ha-shamayim va'et ha'aretz v'ha'aretz hayita tohu vavohu v'choshet al panei tehom v'ruach Elohim merachefet al panei hamayim vayomer Elohim yehi or vayehi or Vayar Elohim et Haor Kitov Vayavdel Elohim Ben Haor Uvein HaChoshek. You want me to keep going?
Yes, you're doing a great job.
Okay. Vayikra Elohim Laor Yom Velachoshek Kara Laila Yahi Erev Vayehi Voker Yom Echad.
That's great. That's fantastic. Maybe one other person would like to volunteer. Who'd like to do it?
I'm happy to give it a go.
Okay.
Okay. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim vet haaretz hayita tohu vavohu vechoshech al panei tehom veruach Elohim merahefet al panei hamayim vayomer Elohim yehi or vayehi or vayar Elohim et haor kitov vayavdel Elohim ben haor uven hachoshech vayikra Elohim laor yom velachoshech kara laila vayehi erev vayehi voker yom echad.
Oh, wow. That's perfect. That's perfect. So we want to keep working on that every time. That maybe kind of a first thing we should do is get where we can do that. Ultimately, I'd like you guys to memorize that. I think I put that in this syllabus, but I'm not expecting perfection, but the more you can memorize, you'll be surprised at how that will just put things together for you. It is hard to memorize something in a foreign language, but it's incredibly helpful, so I commend it to you. And since we've done something hard, Uh, one of the things I've tried to persuade in this class is that Hebrew will pay you back. And I just thought it might be fun for us to take 5 minutes and look at this word light in Genesis. So, what's the word light in Genesis 1:1-5? What's the word light there?
Image.
In the 1:1-5 that we read, what's the word light?
Or.
Okay, does that do anything for you in terms of connections with any other passages or names or anything like that? Nothing really comes to mind, does it? Well, I want to just type in the word light. So here's the word. So tell me what you find interesting about where Abraham is from. So this text, you can see my cursor, I think, says, and Haran died upon the faces of Terah, his father, in the land of his birth, or in the land of his begetting, or something like that. And you see this in Ur of the Chaldees. And do you know that all the names in the Bible mean something? Like whenever they give you a name, it isn't just a name, it's actually connected with a word. What word do you think Ur would be connected to?
Possibly light, because it looks real similar. Just the vav would be different.
Yeah,
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So remember, in the original text, there are no vowel markings, right?
Oh yeah.
So and or in an unpointed text are going to be exactly the same word. And if we looked it up, like in a dictionary, they're going to suggest something like the city of lights or the enlightened city. We'll maybe get into the grammar of that some other time. But what do you find interesting that Abraham, the pagan at this point, is living in what's called the city of lights, and God calls him out of that city to go to Canaan? Do you see any meta-narrative connection there, or do you see any significance if Ur of the Chaldees is like the enlightened city of Ur or something like that? Do you see any connection?
Do you actually call him out of the darkness?
Yeah, he's calling him out of darkness into the light of the true way. He's living in a place where they're worshiping, fertility cults, and they're killing people, and you do the research and look at the articles on Ur of the Chaldees, and they talk about what a pagan city it was. It's kind of like Las Vegas or something, and God comes to him, and he's taking him out of what the world's claiming to be light, but in fact it was darkness. So it's kind of irony, and you can see that as a Hebrew reader, but in English there's no way to connect the word light and the word just like there's no way to connect. I've probably shown you this one before. Behold now, and remember, in an unpointed text, what does that look like in an unpointed text? That's what it is pointed. That's what it is unpointed. What in an unpointed text, what would this word look like?
Adam.
Adam. And you've probably picked up that Esau is selling his birthright for a meal. Who else do you know sold their birthright for a meal? And you realize, oh my goodness, there's a connection with these stories. So part of what Hebrew is going to do for us is going to help us with stuff like that. And while we're doing this light one, what's Bathsheba's husband's name? Remind me what it is.
You're right.
And what's his ethnicity?
Hittite.
Does that do anything for you in terms of like the meaning of his name? Does it seem significant at all to you? Well,
With her.
Yeah, look at what his name is in Hebrew. So, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. What can you tell me about Hittites? Do you know they're Canaanites? Do you know they're one of the 11 tribes or the 12 tribes that Israel is to dispossess of the promised land? And this guy's name is Uriah. Can you tell me any Yah ending on the end of the word is how you say of Yahweh? So what does Uriah's name mean? What would you guess Uriah's name meant? Can you see it's the light of Yahweh? What does that tell you about Uriah?
He honors God.
He had converted to Yahweh worship from being a pagan. He's one of David's 30 mighty men. And David, this scandalous king, just does him wrong. At North Shore here in Chattanooga, the pastoral team's preaching through 1st and 2nd Samuel, and the story of David and Bathsheba was the thing for Sunday, and the guy who was preaching was pointing out that David virtually broke every commandment. The text says the Spirit had come upon him. I mean, he was a believer, but like his flesh was just totally rotten. And here he is. We've got a Gentile who's converted, who who's converted enough where his name means the enlightened one of Yahweh, or Yahweh's enlightened one. He converts to Yahweh worship, and David is such a terrible king that he ends up taking the man's wife and killing him. And the whole contrast with the perfect king, Jesus, who never stays home from any battle. I think once you get into the habit of looking at the meaning of names, you'll get to the place where you look at a name and you'll just see immediately, oh, this means whatever. And we can even start to do it here with Uriah. Questions or comments on that before we go on? So let me pull up. Always come in early and get all this set up, and then by the time I do the Zoom call, I got like 15 files open and I can never find one, but that's my own fault. So we want to start every time getting to where we can read this. Eventually we want to memorize it. The second thing we want to do is we want to talk through the vocabulary. And so maybe you've had a chance to do the pre-video, maybe not, but let's see what we can do with this. And let me get you guys where I can see you again. Did anybody have a good mnemonic device for Cohen? Cohen means priest. Did anybody have a mnemonic device to help with that? I think I told you mine. A lot of Jewish people are named Cohen. If you hear someone like the Cohen brothers, usually that means whoever it is a Jewish person, and their last name means priest. So I don't know if that would help you. But here's a place where Melchizedek is called priest to El Elyon, to God Most High. So Cohen, that's going to be a word that appears everywhere. And O-N, whenever you have a O-N, it usually means a participle. So probably this word originally was the participle serving as priest, but Cohen. This one was always hard for me because it looks like the definite article, but it's not the definite article, and the difference is it has a hatef, patah, a half patah, and it doesn't have the doubling dagesh. So yes, it looks like the word the, but it's not. It's how you introduce a question, and you put it right on the front of a word. And I think I pointed out my just one of my favorite verses. I wrote this in the front of one of my Hebrew Bibles, I think. But is it, so that's the interrogative, hard from Yahweh a thing? Is there anything too hard for Yahweh to do? I think is how you, and so that's how it appears. And whenever this interrogative, that's what you're going to do, is just put it right on the front of a word. And it appears lots of places in the Hebrew Bible. Ko is how you say thus. A lot of prophetic places you have Ko Amar Adonai Elohim, thus says the Lord God. I think I probably gave you a passage I did in Ezekiel 36, Ko Amar Adonai Elohim, thus says the Lord God. This passage, by the way, if you end up sticking with your Hebrew, eventually you want to memorize Ezekiel 36. Memorize Ezekiel 36, 22 to 36. I've memorized it, and it took me about a year to do it. I mean, I worked, it seemed like I would work forever, but I am so glad I memorized it, because Ezekiel 36 is just the passage that puts all kinds of passages together. And so you've got that Ko Amar Adonai Elohim, Ko, thus. Gom is also, here's a place where it appears, and also from the tree of life, and he lakak, and he takes also from the tree of life. Gom. Ayin is called a particle of non-existence, or you could just say it means there is not. Ayin. And here's a place where it appears. And Adam, there is not to work the Adamah. And there was no man to work the Adamah. So, particle of non-existence. Zot is the feminine form of this. So here's a place where it occurs. And Ha-Adam said, this, and I don't know if you just leave it as this, or if you want to say this woman, or if you want to say this, the time. I think you could go any of those with it, but this step, the step, that's what that literally means, is etzem from my etzem, essence from my essence, or bone from my bone, and flesh from my flesh. To this one, it will be called Isha, because from Ish. And can you see how Isha looks like the feminine version of Ish? It will be called Isha. To this one, it will be called Isha, because from Ish. And then this was really weird to me, because I started trying to parse this. It's a pual, but puals usually have a doubled middle radical, and this one didn't. And so I thought, am I parsing it wrong? And I looked it up, and everybody parses a pual, but why isn't it doubled? And then one grammarian pointed out that you shouldn't have a hatef patah here, because these are supposed to be under gutturals, so it has to be some weird thing the scribes did, because you have to say it le kahak. So I don't know if you can't double that, but it is baffling to me that you don't have a doubled middle radical on a pual, but it's clear what it means. This one, it was taken from man. This one was taken. So we got Zoth, and you can see that even as 2 times in this one verse, or 3 times in this one verse. So it appears everywhere. So that's a word you want to get down. And I wanted to point out that the standard old Hebrew grammar, like they call it the Hebrew reference grammar, is Gesenius Couch Cowley. And if you're reading a commentary, that's how you're usually going to see it. And it has so many additions that instead of putting page numbers, they'll give you the section number or the paragraph number. So this is Gesenius Couch Cowley, Hebrew grammar, section 52, paragraph D. And this is where he talks about why it doesn't have a double dagesh. But if you see that GKC, that's what it means. Gesenius, couch, and Calix is one of the standard Hebrew reference grammars. Nasa means to lift up. I can almost guarantee that everybody who's ever learned English in America has the same mnemonic device for this word. NASA lifts things up into space. So at least that's the one I've used, and that's what a lot of my students have used. Here's a place where it appears surely he has lifted up our sicknesses, our illnesses, and our pains he has carried. So Nasa, Isaiah 53:4. Derek means road or way. And so when you see somebody's name Derek spelled with one R, it's coming straight from this Hebrew word. So kind of interesting. Here's a place where it's used, and he drove out, garage. You drive a car out of a garage. That's my mnemonic device. He drove out Ha'adam, and he made him dwell from the east to the Garden of Eden, or he made dwell from the east of the Garden of Eden, the cherubim. You see that? The cherubim, the cherubim. And the flame of the cherev, the flame of the sword. And then this is a weird word. Turning about in every direction, but it's in the hithpail, and it's a feminine participle because sword is feminine. So there's a sword turning in every possible direction that's made out of fire, and it guards the derek, the way of the tree of lives. I don't know why lives is plural, but it is plural. So it's kind of interesting there. Any comments about any of this or observations before we go on? You guys good in this grammar vocab review? All right. Nefesh. This is a weird word. It means soul. But the weird thing about this word is it also means appetite. So, nefesh, hell has a nefesh, an appetite for dead people. So that's kind of weird. But if we just memorize it as soul and then realize that every now and then it means appetite, here's kind of a strange use of it. And everything which Ha'adam called the Nefesh Hayah, the living soul, but here it's living creature. That was its name. So kind of a weird word, interesting word, appears everywhere. Soul will be our main meaning, but it can mean other things like appetite and living creature. And how hell has a nefesh, that's kind of an interesting discussion in itself. Kum, I think my mnemonic device there is Talitha Kum, little girl, I say to you, get up. I know my Aramaic teacher, just Gleason Archer, he just was certain that the reading Talitha Kumi is right, because Kumi is the imperative in Aramaic. But Mark translates it Talitha Kum, little girl, I say to you to get up, or little girl, I say to you, get up. So I think he's reading it as the infinitive, and if it's the infinitive, I think kum is right, not kumi, but I don't know. I defer. Ryan, you're fresher off your Aramaic paradigms than I am, so you might know, but regardless of that discussion, if you can remember, little girl, I say to you, get up, or if you can remember that, you can get this word, kum, to get up. Here's a place where it's used. What is this? Oh, it's the Sodom and Gomorrah story. And when dawn came up, the angels, one of whom we're going to find out is Yahweh at the end of this story, but the angels urged Lot, saying, "Kum, get up, lakak, kak, take your wife, your ishtika, take your two daughters, the ones found, lest you be swept away in the evil of the city. Get up, get out." Interesting verse. It was really interesting. This week I was in my Gen Ed Old Testament class. We were doing the Ten Commandments, and I try to read the assignments in Hebrew whenever I give it to them in English. And I was reading when it says God describes himself as, I took you by the hand to take you out of, the land of Egypt. I'm pretty sure that's the exact same phrase of these angels taking Lot and his family by the hand. And so it's interesting that these angels dragged Lot and his daughters and his wife out of Sodom and Gomorrah. And God is saying to his people, I took you out of Egypt. I don't know if there's a connection there, but it is odd that the phrase is, I didn't have time to look it up, but I think it's the exact same phrase. If it's not the exact, it's a very similar phrase. Seem is to put or place. Does anybody have a great mnemonic device for that? I really didn't. I just had to memorize. Seem means put or place. Anybody have a mnemonic device for that? This is our sentence, and he placed there the Ha-Adam, he placed there the man whom he fashioned. So this is called a hollow verb, so it's irregular. That's why the yod drops out. But it means place. Seem means place.
A seam in I guess clothing for fashion. I don't know.
Yeah, you put a seam in clothes. I mean, that could be a mnemonic device. I found that when I'm memorizing words, I have to come up with some kind of mnemonic device, and sometimes they're silly and sometimes they make sense, but it's a way to get it into my midterm memory. And then if I use it enough, it'll get in my long-term memory. So that's a good suggestion, Antonio. Har means mountain. Edom has a mountain called Har, mountain. It's not very creative, but nevertheless. So this appears everywhere. Our Exodus 3:1, and he came to the mountain of the Elohim, the mountain of God. and then this is probably a locatival hey, to Horeb. And you may or may not know that Horeb means destruction. So he's coming to Mount Destruction, which is the other name for Mount Sinai. Kind of interesting thing going on there. Mayim we probably know from Genesis 1. Waters. Nobody can explain why the word waters is in the dual. So the Aim ending is a dual ending. Nobody knows why it's a dual, but it is. Some people think that the term Shamayim is actually two words, there and water. So heaven would be a place where there is water. I'm not convinced that's the right etymology, but it is an etymology that Jews talk about. So it's interesting. Here's a place, and I will sprinkle upon you Mahim Tehorim, waters pure, and you will be pure from all your uncleannesses. Again, this is Ezekiel 36. Great passage. Goy is usually the word when you're speaking about a foreigner, you use the term goy. And in Israel today, if you're a Jewish person and you're trying to find somebody to work on the Sabbath, you have to find a Shabbat goy, a Sabbath goy. The goyim is usually a derogative term, the nations, but at least here it's used in a positive sense. And I will make you into a goy gadol, into a great nation. So part of the Abrahamic promise. Bat is daughter. I think I gave you a mnemonic device of a bat mitzvah. So if you're a 13-year-old little girl, you have a bat mitzvah. If you're a 13-year-old little boy or 12 or whatever it is, you have a bar mitzvah. So you're either a son of the covenant or a daughter of the covenant. And here's a place where it's used. The B'nai Ha-Elohim saw that the daughters of Ha-Adam, that they were Tov. I don't know if you've ever picked up, but that's the same language of Eve looking at the forbidden fruit. She sees that it's Tov, and it's the same language of God, and God saw that it was good. So kind of an interesting thing, but uses the word daughter, and so this is daughter, and this is daughters, plural. Okay, so now let's play a game. Without looking at your notes, tell me any of those words. So we went over 15. Can you... I'm going to get a piece of paper and we'll see how many we can do. Okay, tell me any of the words that we've learned.
Heart.
Sorry, which one was that?
Car.
Help me, what does that mean?
Mountain.
Oh, har. I'm sorry, I was hearing it. Good. Mountain. One.
Mayim,
Mayim? And what does Mayim mean?
water.
Good. Okay, anybody...
Which means Seth.
Seam means set, that's right. Okay, that's 3.
But
But,
Daughter.
daughter.
Cohen for priest.
Good. Cohen is priest.
Oh,
Oh, good. Co means what?
thus.
Thus. Oh, we're almost halfway. 7. This one will be.
Nasa.
Sorry?
Is it Nasa?
Nasa. That's exactly right. And what does that mean?
Lift.
and and do you have a mnemonic device?
NASA.
NASA, absolutely. Okay, we'll be halfway with this one. We've got Har, Mayim, Sim, Bat, Cohen, Ko, Nasa.
Goy.
Goy. Very good. Goy means
People or nation.
good. All right, we're on the downhill stretch.
Did we say bot already?
Bot, we got bot. That's right, daughter.
Yeah.
So we need 7 more.
We didn't do ish today, did we?
Ish.
Yeah. That wasn't today. That was just.
Okay, we talked about Ish and Isha.
Right. But that wasn't one of the words.
I'm trying
That's
to
what
remember
group
what I'm trying to remember what that word is. Oh my goodness, this is so good. Whenever you feel your brain kind of doing that, mine always right here, like I get this uncomfortableness, and I know I'm about to get something because whenever my brain will do that, then I'll get it the next time. I don't know if you have that sensation or not, but I do. So we need 7 words.
Co.
Co we've got thus.
Zoot is this.
Coom is a new one.
Oh, yeah.
And what does coom mean?
Stand up or get up.
Good. Talitha coom. I think John Piper, when he named his daughter Talitha, I think he must have had that gospel story in mind, but I don't know. Okay, so we need 6 more. We've got Har, Mayim, Sim, Bat, Cohen, Ko, Nasa, Goy, and Coom.
Zoot this.
Haha, nice. That's the one where we were talking about the Ish and Isha. This, and it's the feminine this.
Zay would be the masculine, right?
That's right. That's right.
So it's the interrogative particle ha goes with zay or ma goes with zot. Is that right? What is this?
Yeah, ma is what, and then hey, which is another one, is the interrogative particle. So it turns whatever you say into a question.
So you could do either. So you could say hazot and it's what is this?
What is this? Yeah.
Did we do Derek?
Derek, that's another one. And what does Derek mean?
Way.
Good. So we only have 3 left.
Did we do the interrogative particle yet?
Hey, we did the interrogative.
Okay. Nefesh.
Ha ha ha! Nefesh, that's right. And what does nefesh mean?
Soul, living thing, appetite, something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so we're down to 2.
Was Gom one?
Ha ha ha! Gom. Gom was 1. What does Gom mean?
Also?
Also. Okay, so there's one word.
Is it Zot that we're missing?
Bot we got, daughter.
No, Zot.
This, we got that one too, this woman. Mm. Oh my goodness, I'm just drawing a blank. Do we have to retreat and give the field to the enemy? Do we have to tap out and say I give up, or can we get this last one? Mm. Oh my goodness. Bot, Goy we got, Maim we got, Har we got.
Is it Tove?
And what does Tove mean?
Good?
Good? I don't think Tove's in the list though.
Okay. I remember we going over it.
It may be in the list because I can't remember what the last one is.
Is it Gadol?
Sorry?
Is it Gadol? Did we talk about?
Gadol, and what is Gadol?
Great.
Great, but I don't think it's on this list. Nefesh we've done. Oh my goodness.
Oh, it was the non-existence one,
Ah! That's it!
which is
Yo.
Iron.
what was it?
Iron.
Iron, yeah.
Iron. We do not have to give up the field. The enemy has to give up the field. We as a team conquered. That is so great. Do you feel how good that feels when you, like, that like, I don't know what you call that, but I've found that if you can make yourself get to the place where you feel that discomfort, if you ever remember it, you're like, if you can feel how happy you feel right now, that's like this endorphin high, and it's going to help you remember the word forever, I think. So, man, that is so great. We got all 15 words. We pulled them up forwards and backwards. So I'll bet you're going to have no problem when you do the quiz. So we've concentrated. We're kind of at the halfway point. Anybody want to tell a joke, or do you have significant plans coming up for the weekend? Of course, me as a Georgia fan, it's our biggest game with Florida. They beat us for so many years in a row, and now we're doing a little better. And if they lose that game, I'm a grown man, and I'm gonna mope around for 3 weeks.
Kind of like that one with Texas A&M.
Yeah, but you guys are coming back. You you will lose a game like that and end up winning the national championship. We'll lose a game like that and end up being cut out of the playoffs. So
I don't think y'all gonna lose though.
it may
There's a
be our
game
year.
tonight.
There is a game
Oh
tonight.
yeah, that's a great game tonight.
Braves, are you guys all Braves fans?
Oh yeah.
So I was working in Atlanta when they won in '95, and I happened to be downtown when they had their parade, and so I remember it like it was yesterday. You know, they rode the fire trucks, and you could take a baseball, and if you threw a baseball, they would sign it and throw it back to you. It was pretty cool. So maybe they'll win. I really want them to win. I know they've lost a lot of World Series. Oh my goodness. They were up 3-1 against the Yankees one time and lost that series. That was crazy.
Yeah, they sound like last year to the Dodgers.
I am happy. They've moved that stadium, the old Fulton County Stadium, and then Turner Field they built for the Olympics. But they've moved both of Turner Field they gave to Georgia State, plays their football there, and then Fulton County they tore down, but they still have the marker in the parking lot where Marquise Grissom caught the final out. But then they built a huge new stadium north of Atlanta, and I haven't been to that one, but I hear it's beautiful.
It's really nice. It doesn't have the same feel as the TED to me, but it's definitely it's an experience because it's got like a whole park and shopping center and restaurants and all kinds of stuff.
Well, maybe they'll win. The first time the Braves went to the World Series, I think was in 1990 or 1989, and Lynn and I, my wife, we were living in England. I was studying over there, and we didn't have a TV or anything. This Penny was, doctoral student over there, and we were laying in bed, and the phone started ringing, and it was like 1:00 in the morning, and so we're living in this row house, like one of those skinny little houses, that has three, and they all look exactly the same. We were living in one of those, and so I'm running down to get the phone, and I'm just certain that somebody's died. That's the only time you get called in the middle of the night. And so I'm groggy because, they're 5 hours in front or behind. I guess it's in front. So I get to the phone, and it's my brother-in-law, and he's screaming, "The Braves are in the World Series! The Braves are in the World Series!" And I'm just certain like that somebody's died, and he was so excited, but he had forgotten that we're 5 hours ahead. And so it may have been like way in the morning, but and then I was over there again when the Braves lost the World Series, and that was very depressing. Years later when they lost, but. All right.
One of the reasons I can't stand the Yankees now.
I tell you, I didn't think they were going to lose, but I think Joe Torre, the former Braves manager, I think he had it. I think he wanted that game really badly. So, okay, so have we rested our minds? Can we jump back in? So I want to do something. So you guys are seeing Logos. Let me see if I can pull it up. Yes, and you can see the cursor. Okay, let's do a couple of sight verses. So this is Psalm 1:1. Asher Ha'ish Asher Lo Halak Ba Etzath Reshaim U Baderek. Oh my goodness, that's one of our words. Ha Ta'im Lo Amad U Bemoshav Leitzim Lo Yashav. Any of those words you recognize just looking at that verse?
Low,
Lo? And what does lo mean?
not,
Not, not. Three uses of not. So doesn't halak, doesn't amad, doesn't yashav. We had any of those words?
All of them.
And what do they mean?
Halak is to walk, Amar is to say, and Yashav means to dwell, but is that an imperfect?
Well, it looks like an imperfect, but the yod is actually part of the word, so it's just the perfect form.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it's walk, and I guess that's a mod. So that's stand and sit. He doesn't walk. He doesn't stand still. He doesn't sit. Anything else that you recognize from that verse?
Ha'ish,
Ha'ish. What does Ha'ish mean?
the man.
Blessed is the man, Ha'ish. Good. Anything else? What are these little letters? A and B. What is that?
Critical apparatus.
Yeah, textual variants. So you look at that and you say, what in the world is that? Well, the people who do these textual apparatus thought that it would be a great thing to do them in Latin. I'm not sure the logic behind that, but they're just assuming we know Latin and abbreviated Latin. The nice thing about Logos is it will translate it for us. And you say, well, that doesn't do me much good because all it did was spell out the total Latin. Well, I'll show you a trick, okay? In Logos, there's a free resource called the Latin Forms Dictionary. You can go to the Logos website and download it for free. They'll give it to you. It doesn't cost a dime. And any Latin word, if you just paste in, it'll tell you what it means. And so this is where we get the word inverted from, right? And you might be able to guess what the word ordine means. What would you guess that word meant? We get like ordo salutis from it, inverted order. And then we've got this funny looking S. So what does that mean? Oh, wow. You guys can't see those pop-up things, can you? Sorry. Well, when you're in Logos, if you take your cursor and hover over the words, it will give you the abbreviation. So this is the Syriac. The Syriac inverts the order of A and B. So in the Syriac, it says, does not walk in the counsel in the way of sinners. The Syriac flips those. I'm not sure that makes much of a difference, but that is a textual variant. Anything else you recognize in this verse? So, do you all know about this resource, ACOT, the Analytical Key to the Old Testament? Do you guys have that as part of your Logos package? If you don't, if I were learning Hebrew again, they didn't have this when I was learning Hebrew, but if I were just starting out in Hebrew, this would be the first resource I would buy after the Bible. I'd buy a Hebrew Bible and then I'd buy ACOT. ACOT parses every word for you. So Ashrei is a noun feminine plural construct to the word blessed. So the blessings of the man who does not walk, call perfect of walk, in the counsel construct of, the counsel of Reshaim, the wicked people. So ACOT is a great resource, but I want to show you something. This is your bribe for being great Hebrew students, okay? Blessed is the man who. Did you know that Psalm 2 ends with that phrase? Psalm 1:1 and 1:2. Blessed is everyone taking refuge in him. That's called an inclusio, where something starts and ends with the same thing, and it means read them together. So that's not the bribe. This is the bribe. Verse 12. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry with you and you perish in the way. Who can tell me the Hebrew word for son? That is the word for son, but it's not Hebrew.
I mean, Ben.
Ben is the Hebrew word for son, right? And it appears in Psalm 2 against the Lord and against his Messiah. I will tell the decree of the Lord. You are my son. What verse is that? It's in 2. Why do the nations rage, kings of the earth, against the Lord and against his Messiah? Let us break their bonds. He who sits in the heaven's last, Adonai, scoffs at them. I've installed my son on Zion, the mountain of my holiness. I will tell, here, Ben, he said to me, you are my son. And you see there in verse 7, right? You are my son. Ben is the word son in Hebrew, right? So why in the world does verse 12 have the word son not in Hebrew but in Aramaic? I mean, if we look it up, bar, Aramaic for son. Why in the world would you spell son two different ways in the same psalm? So here's my thesis. You tell me what you think of it. It's absolutely meaningless. There's no reason why the word son is written in Aramaic in verse 12. Ryan, I saw you laugh. My feelings are so hurt. Why in the world would you be writing in Hebrew and then mid-sentence change the language you were using from Hebrew to Aramaic?
How would we know that, being a beginner, how would we know that that's what happened? Because it still looks like, to me, it looks the same.
Well, it does look the same. Can I give you an example, Antonio?
Sure.
So, Antonio, imagine, can you see me typing here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Imagine that you saw me type the phrase kiss den zone lest he be angry. What do you recognize about the word son there? What do you recognize?
Double H.
Right. Do you recognize that it's misspelled?
Right.
So that word son there is German. That's how you write the word son in German.
Mm-hmm.
So if you saw that sentence, would you as a reader have a question of me about my sentence? If you saw that in something I had written.
If I didn't know you speak German, I would assume you misspelled it.
Yeah, you would assume that it was a misspelling. But if you knew I knew German, what question would you ask?
Why did you do that?
Why did you do it?
Yeah, why are you combining two languages?
That's exactly what's happening in Psalm 212. God wants us to ask the question, why did you switch languages from Hebrew to Aramaic? If we were reading it in Hebrew, the word bar is the word pure. So you could, in Hebrew, read it, kiss the pure one. But even then, it's like, why are you calling him the pure one? But it's clear that David knew how to spell the word son because he spells it the normal way in verse 5 or whatever it is. He knows how to spell son in Hebrew, but he doesn't write son. Another question we might ask is, where else does the word bar appear in the Bible?
New Testament.
Are there any Aramaic parts of the Old Testament? Are any parts of the Old Testament written in Aramaic?
About half of Daniel and half of Ezra.
And in those halves,
Ah,
do you have a strange figure that
Daniel chapter 7.
and what is that figure?
He's the one that comes up to the Ancient of Days and
ancient day.
given a kingdom who's
Oh, you mean like this guy's given a kingdom in 2? Oh my goodness. Would you ever have even asked that question in English? Because it's impossible to see that it's in another language. So when I learned Hebrew, have I told you this story about the guy who taught me Hebrew? Have I told you this at all? His name was Gerald Wilson. Have I told you this? So Gerald Wilson, when he taught me Hebrew, it was the first year he was out of college. And he taught at Georgia for a little while. And he went to Yale, so he was really smart. But he ended up writing the book, the one book that has become the book about the editing of the Psalter. He's dead now. He died when he was 53 years old, but you can just type in Gerald Wilson and editing the Psalter, everybody quotes it. Wilson said that verse 12, I'm just going to pull Logos back up. Verse 12 says, "Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you all perish in the way, because his wrath will flare up in a moment." Okay, grammatically, who is the he in that sentence? Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you perish in the way, because his wrath will flare up in a moment. Who is the he?
The
Son.
Lord.
So I hear Amanda say the Lord, and I think Antonio say the Son. I think grammatically it's the Son, but Amanda, your sensibility is right because it's a very Lord-like thing, lest his anger flare up. Notice the phrase, "Blessed are those taking refuge in him." Who is the him there? Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, because his wrath will flare up in a moment. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. Who is the him?
The Son.
The Son. So Gerald Wilson, editing the Psalter, he said grammatically it's the Son. But then he said, but it can't be the Son, because everything in the Psalter says don't take refuge in men, take refuge in Yahweh. Since Wilson died, a lot of people have said the Psalter moves from taking hope in the Messiah to, by the end, you're taking hope in Yahweh. What if what's happening in the Psalter is the merging of Yahweh and the Messiah? And what if Psalm 2, as the beginning, is the hint at that there is a figure who isn't just an earthly Messiah, he's actually the Son of Man, the mysterious figure in Daniel 7 that the high priest tears his clothes when Jesus says, "Who are you?" And Jesus says, "I'm that guy." And the high priest says, "Blasphemy." That verse, the Daniel 7 verse was such that you have a second figure who is acting like God, who is accepted in God's presence, who looks like God looks, but that would run counter to everything in the assumption of monotheism unless the Bible from the very beginning has this Trinitarian view of God. And what if God in his inspiration is just putting these clues, this breadcrumb trail for us to find? And what if that's why you have this word that's written in a different language, right in the middle of the Hebrew introduction to the Psalter?
Dr. Davis, how did you get from Psalm 2:12 to the Daniel passage? Is it just because the Daniel passage is in that section's in Aramaic? Is that the only?
Yes, that's the only. Well, it's
virtually the same passage almost, sort of. I mean, Daniel 7
you have
and
a
Psalm 2. Yeah.
go on, Ryan.
They just sort of seem to overlap with this son figure who is presented something and given something. He's given a kingdom, and it's all the nations that he'll dash into pieces as Psalm 2, but in Daniel 7 he has dominion over them, and it's clearly that God-man interplay.
Yeah.
And if you
My mind is kind of exploding right now because I'm writing a paper for Christology on the Daniel 7 passage regarding the Son of Man.
okay, don't mention my name because
I'm trying to understand how you're connecting the Daniel 7 to Psalm 2.
Your professor is going to say that Hebrew guy has lost his mind. So
I'm like, wow, I was definitely connecting it to the passages in the Gospels about the high priest ripping their clothes, but I hadn't pulled it to Psalm 2 yet. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly that, like, a scholar in Hebrew and Aramaic would have connected these two because of the language.
well, I don't think they would say, well, how do you take a Davidic passage and connect it to Daniel when Daniel doesn't live for 500 more years, which is true. But it is interesting that two things are interesting: that it's in Aramaic and nobody has a good explanation why it's in Aramaic. And the other thing is, Amanda, the ESV does this against the Lord and against his anointed. Is there another way you could translate that? If it's
Messiah.
And his Messiah. See, everybody assumes this is about David. It's not about David, and here's why. Or, in my humble opinion, this is why it's not about David. Because Psalm 3 says, this is the Mizmor of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. If 2:12 is an inclusio, blessed is those who take refuge in him, and it's talking about taking refuge in the Messiah, is David, and remember where we started in 1, blessed is the man who didn't stand in the counsel of the wicked. In the way of sinners did not stand. In the seat of scoffers did not sit. He, rather, on the Torah of Yahweh, he meditated day and night. He will be like a tree planted by... That sounds like somebody who's going to be like the tree of life. And David, the first two books of the Psalter are written by David, did David think he was the righteous man of Psalm 1? You don't put Psalm 3 because that's after he's slept with Bathsheba and killed Uriah. David is telling us he's not the blessed man. And if he's not the blessed man, then he's not the Messiah of 2. And he's not the kiss the Son at the end of 2. David was looking forward to another, someone who would be the true tree of life. But Amanda, you can't associate that with my name, because if you put that on a paper, your teacher is going to say that guy has lost his mind. And
my teacher is just going to be, shocked that I could possibly connect the Aramaic.
well, you take total credit for that. You take.
No, I don't know if I can justify that in my paper from my own brain, but it's pretty amazing. I mean, I've been digging through Daniel 7 for the last 2 or 3 weeks, so my mind is kind of melting right now.
But it is pretty interesting too that, some people might think that Jesus' primary language was Aramaic as well. So that this son, it's written in Aramaic, and that's what he spoke.
And if David wrote in Paleo Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew is a different script. Did you know that? It could be that when Psalm 2 was originally written, if it was written in Paleo Hebrew, it could be that the word bar is written in Aramaic square script, and so it could have been written in a different font. But you guys take that as a nugget.
Run with it.
And run with it.
I'm tracking with you here, and I'm especially with the light of revelation that we have looking back. I can see those connections, but I am curious as well. Since Daniel didn't come for another several hundred years, would there be? Because in my mind, it would still have to have some reason for the original readers as well when David wrote it. And so are there any suggestions or hypotheses on what the original reader would have made of that prior to Daniel being written?
So, some people say that it's is the right word assonance. Some people say it's written in Aramaic because they didn't like the sound of the word ben in that position, and to avoid an undesirable, that's why they put it in Aramaic. I find that pretty unconvincing.
Especially when you got Ben a couple of verses.
Yeah, it's the Ben is a couple verses, and it's in the very next verse when David fled from Absalom, his son, Beno. I think that B.B. Warfield was right when he said the Old Testament is like a lavishly furnished room dimly lit. And progressive revelation isn't that the meaning changes, but the more candles that come in, the clearer it is. And so I think what you say in terms of David's audience is there's a baffling mysterious feature in that the end verse describes sun in Aramaic, which must have confused many of the readers, bafflingly confused, until Daniel comes along. And Daniel's talking about this second figure who looks like God. And I don't know if you know that whole text variant in Deuteronomy 32 that Hebrews quotes, where it says, worship the sun, let all the angels of God worship the sun. The writer of Hebrews quotes that, and you go to BHS and you try to find it, and it's not there. And so a lot of people say, oh, the writer of Hebrews is quoting the Septuagint. The problem is, where it is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is 1,000 years older than B19A. And the Dead Sea Scrolls has the passage. It's the last words out of Moses' mouth before he dies. Let all the angels of God worship him. And so you have this mysterious coming figure who almost impinges on monotheism until you realize, oh my goodness, God has been Trinitarian all along, and these second figures aren't some kind of threat to monotheism, but rather the expression of monotheism. And for Jesus to say, if you want to know who I am, go to Daniel 7, that's who I am. And the high priest says, blasphemy. But then you start giving Jesus the benefit of the doubt, and we're at Gerald Wilson's question, how do you take refuge in a human being when the entire Psalter says, don't ever take refuge in a human being, only take refuge in Yahweh? Well, if the Messiah is Yahweh, then it would make perfect sense. But be a Berean. Poke holes in that. Do a history of interpretation. Go to Mikroth Gedaloth, commentaries, the rabbinic commentary, and see if any of those connect the passage with the coming Son of Man. And I don't know. It may be wrong, but it's at least worth teasing out. Would you grant that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, with the room being fully lit for us now, I see it. There's always just this nagging in me that also goes, well, what about the original audience?
Well, what I think we can say about the original audience is, if David thought he was the blessed man in Psalm 1:1, why in the world would he put Psalm 3, which is the psalm he wrote as he fled for his life? And, don't want to be crass, but ask Tamar, David's daughter, if whatever he does prospers. Because I think she would say, my dad was so flawed as a human being that I ended up being raped by my own brother because my father couldn't confront my brother's sexual sin because my father had the exact same sexual sin. I don't think there's any way that David can write Psalm 3 and believe that he's the blessed man. And because you have the inclusio of blessed as though starts and ends, I don't think David believed he was the Messiah of Psalm 2. It's certainly not how the New Testament writers read Psalm 2. They all read it as about Jesus. So, but go ahead.
Go ahead and finish.
Can you see how practical and helpful knowing the original language is in terms of these very discussions? I mean, I have to admit, I like Greek and Hebrew. I like Greek and Hebrew just in terms of ancient language. But I love the biblical theology that Greek and Hebrew lets me engage with. Because if I didn't have access to that, I couldn't ask the questions. I would read "Kiss the Son lest he be angry," and there's no way that's significant at all until you realize it's in Aramaic, and then it's like, well, why is it in Aramaic? And you go to the commentaries, and nobody even hardly talks about it. It's like, okay, well, why is it Aramaic? And then you read Psalm 3, and it's like David's sin, and well, if he's the Messiah, and I don't know, it just, all that pushes me to the place where I think the New Testament writers were a lot better Old Testament exegetes than we give them credit for. And I think they got their exegesis from Jesus, who's the author of Scripture. And to those who would question, rightly so, they would say, well, aren't we after authorial intent? Isn't authorial intent determinative of meaning? And I would say yes, but isn't God the ultimate author of Scripture? And if God is the ultimate author of Scripture, is it not possible that God inspires meanings in some extent that even the human author might not have fully realized? And if you say yes to that question, then the connection, why is it in Aramaic? Because God put it there because he was going to have another Aramaic text that was going to come along and explain it. So,
and not to belabor the point, because I know this is just supposed to be a sight verse, but thinking through that a little bit, I mean, and if you take for granted the assumption that Israel was constantly looking for this Messiah that was promised in Genesis 3, and they see this David figure and start to think that, I'm just thinking out loud at this point, but thinking maybe David could have done that intentionally to point outside of himself and show, I'm not the son that this psalm is talking. I'm not trying to talk about myself here. Like, I'm not even going to use the same, you should be looking elsewhere. There's something outside of me. That may be too big of a leap. I don't know.
No,
but it's just a fascinating theory that's got my mind turning. So
I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly what David did. So you can see that my bribe is working, right? Welcome to my addiction. Is the whole Bible? Every page of the Bible is like this. There's a sentence in Jeremiah. You're reading along, and all of a sudden there's a sentence in Aramaic. Why in the world is that sentence in Aramaic? There's a place in Jeremiah. Will you guys indulge me just for like 3 minutes? How many of you ever heard of the term an Atbash code? You ever heard that term Atbash code? It refers to a code where you take your alphabet and then you write your alphabet backwards. So A, B, C, D, and your A's would become Z's and your B's would become X's. And it's called Atbash because it's referring to the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Tav. And in Jeremiah, I think it's Jeremiah 49, there are two sentences that are written in an Atbash code, where the sentences make perfect sense if you read them as they're written, and they also make perfect sense if you read them as if they were an Atbash code written backwards in the alphabet. Think about that for a second. Like you had a sentence, my cat's name is Fluffy, but then if that were an Atbash code, you have this second sentence that, is not about your cat, but about your, secret code to your bank account or something. There are two sentences in Jeremiah that all scholars recognize are written as an Atbash code, where they mean they have a perfectly sound meaning if you read them as they're written, and they have also a perfectly sound meaning if they're written in an inverted alphabet, Atbash. I couldn't do that in English if my life depended on it. And whoever wrote Jeremiah could do it not once but twice. And I don't think it's Jeremiah who did it. I think it was God who did it, because things like that are no problem for God. And so for me, that's why Psalm 212 is so interesting, because it begs the question, why is it written in Aramaic? So, I don't know. I hope you enjoy that. It sounds like you do. Welcome to the playground of the Hebrew Bible, because it's filled with glorious treasures like that. Okay. I'm kind of sorry that I talk so much about that, but I'm kind of not, because I think that if I'm trying to bribe you guys into being lifelong learners of Hebrew, I think stuff like that will probably go longer than if we memorize paradigms. So I don't know. If we run into each other 10 or 15 years down the road, you tell me whether it works or not. So you probably want to go over the Shema here, Shema Israel. That's a great one to hear someone say, and it's a pretty simple thing to translate, so you might want to work on that. And then one of the passages that we're going to be able to read by the time we finish is Ezekiel 36, and so I had two of these verses. So as you work through, at the bottom here, I put ACOT. So if you don't have that, you can print this out, and that'll give you a way to read those three passages that we have. I think you'll like them. Of course, they're parsing every word. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is the thing we're actually going to memorize today, which is the imperfect. So katal is our paradigm word. It means kill. And this is how you say he will kill, she will kill, you will kill, you woman will kill, I will kill. They men will kill, they women will kill, you men will kill, you women will kill, we will kill. So you know, the goal of memorizing today is to be able to say that conjugation in Hebrew. Yiktol, tiktol, tiktol, tiktoli, ektol. Yiktalu, tiktolna, tiktalu, tiktolna, niktol. You want to be able to say that. That's really easy. Well, not really easy. It's not as hard as some things we will do. This is the hard thing to understand. The imperfect in Hebrew can be past, present, or future. So yiktol can mean he was killing, or just as equally it can mean he will be killing, and just as easily he is killing right now. It can mean all three of those things. Now, show of hands, how many of you find that a difficult idea? Okay, like I totally don't get that. The best explanation I've ever read is this one. And these writers say the term imperfect is used to describe this verb conjugation because it denotes incomplete action in the mind of the speaker. In other words, the speaker is envisioning the action in his mind as an ongoing event, either in the past or the future, and you could do it in the present. Now, how it plays out, start off with this one and see if it'll work. Like just a practical rule. When you come to an imperfect, start out with the past progressive and see if that makes sense in the passage. And if it does, then that's how you should go with it. In the back of your mind, realize that it also can be used as a future progressive. He will be doing this.
Is that kind of similar to the verbal aspect Greek scholars are sort of doing, how they're trying to pull time out of it a little bit?
It's exactly the same.
Because they say they try to give three categories, right? Like perfective, stative, I forget.
Yeah, iterative, durative, and perfective. Yeah, that. So Hebrew verbs are all about aspect, not about time. That's why it's confusing to us. Can I do one more bribe for you? This is another reason. This is another reason that this passage isn't talking about David, at least in my opinion. Okay, in English, can you tell me how we translate Psalm 1:1?
That's the man who walks not in the counsel of the God.
Okay.
Or stand in the way of sinners. Or sit in the seat of scoffers.
Good. So that's the ESV, nearly all English translations. Let me show you the Septuagint translation.
Which Septuagint are you using?
This is the New English translation, which is the scholarly translation, but the underlying text would be Rolf's, or ultimately it's the Göttingen, like the scholarly one is the Göttingen, but Rolf's did both of them, but it's Rolf's, but this is the English translation. How is the English translation different from the ESV?
One of them is past.
Right. Let's look at the Targum. So this is the Aramaic translation. How does the Targum do it?
Like the Septuagint, closer.
Right. So, how easy is it for me to assume with the ESV that I'm the blessed man, or that I should be the blessed man?
Right.
It's pretty easy, right? But you tell me, you read it, we read it together. Is this an imperfect or is it a perfect? It's a perfect, which means that the Septuagint and the Targum are making a perfectly logical case. This isn't about the man who is currently doing it. This is about the man who can say of his life, I have not done it. Was that true of David?
No.
And somebody's going to say, well, doesn't David say in Psalm 18, Lord, you have rewarded me according to the righteousness of my hands? Doesn't David say that in Psalm 18? And don't you want to say to David, David, are you remembering the same story I remembered? Because I'm not sure I would say, I mean, and so you say, well, maybe he wrote Psalm 18, before the whole Bathsheba thing. Okay, well, why does he include Psalm 18 at the end of 2 Samuel right before he dies? You say, well, he's not remembering. Really, the event that destroyed his kingdom and destroyed his family, he's not remembering? Or maybe when he's praying, reward me according to the righteousness of my hands, he's speaking in the voice of another. I don't know. I'm a Christocentric person. I have spent my life studying the Christological use of the Old Testament, so I'm sure my Old Testament friends would say, oh, there you go again. But I would point out that the Hebrew text is on my side. It doesn't say, blessed is the man who is standing, participle. It says, blessed is the man who has not stood. And that's exactly what the ancient versions say. And if you read it like that, there's no way David thought Psalm 1 was about him. And if he's not the tree of Eden's tree of life in Psalm 1, then he's certainly not the king in Psalm 2. And if he's not the king in Psalm 2, he's not the Aramaic son that people kiss. He's the fallen anti-king who wrecked everything, and he's looking for another. He's taking refuge in the coming one. But that's my shameless bribe to you to study your Hebrew paradigms, to read the text, to encourage people to be Bereans, and to see if those things are true. So that's what I have for you tonight. Any comments or stuff before we go?
This is not about the lesson, but Abraham brought up the original readers. And I once had a question about Isaiah 53. Who was Isaiah talking?
So when you read through Isaiah and you're looking for the suffering servant, it's unclear at first. I mean, is it Cyrus? You can go to Isaiah 42 and you can kind of make a case for Cyrus, but why does it go from Cyrus to 7 chapters of I am Yahweh, there is no other, I alone, I don't give my glory to someone else. And then it goes to the suffering servant, I alone am the Savior. Isaiah 43, then the Lord, the glory of the Lord will appear and all flesh will see it together. Well, that's talking about a second Exodus when Yahweh comes, and then you ask, why are all the Gospels quoting that with Jesus? They're doing it because Jesus is the Yahweh who came, and he is the suffering servant. And that's why when you read Isaiah 49, and then you put Psalm 22 beside it, Isaiah 49 is quoting Psalm 22, which is, they pierced my hands and feet. When was David's hands and feet ever pierced? And some people say, oh, well, B19A says it doesn't say pierced, it says like a lion. And that's absolutely true. B19A does say like a lion, not pierce my hands and feet. But I ask, what does the Dead Sea Scrolls say? Because 4Q88 and 5.6 Nahal Hever both have, they pierce my hands and feet. And they're written pre-78 AD. So I don't think Psalm 22 was ever about David. I think Psalm 22 is always been about Jesus. And I will point out that 2 of the gospel writers have Jesus saying one thing on the cross. And it's a quote from Psalm 22, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? And if Jesus is saying in his dying breath, Psalm 22 is about what's going on right now, then who in the world am I to say anything different than that? So I think the figure, the suffering servant, is Jesus. I think it was always Jesus. But I know I have friends and scholars who would debate, but I think the text is on my side. So you be a Berean. You decide for yourself. Other comments or questions before we go?
Well, I've been sitting here thinking, and I'm gonna try to make mine as quick as possible. We always talk about the shortcomings and idiosyncrasies of David, but God said David was a man after my own heart. But if you look at the word heart in the Old Testament in Hebrew, and you look at the word heart in the New Testament in Hebrew, the word heart in the New Testament Hebrew, it means emotion. But in Hebrew, when he uses the word heart, God is saying who thinks like me, who has a mind like me. But I think a lot of times we confuse the way a person thinks with his attitude and what he is doing. That's why I felt that when God says, I will give you a man after my own heart, I give you a man who thinks like I do. When David couldn't get the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem, he left it in the field. But he went and got counselors to tell him what he needed to do to get it back. That's a mindset.
Yeah.
Now that's what I think.
And Willie, I think exactly what you said is the best and strongest argument against my position. I think it's exactly right, and I think it invites me to try to answer that, because that is what you said is the best, not, for a non-Christocentric approach. But I do think there is an answer in that. God calls Lot righteous. Peter calls Lot righteous. And you go back and read the Old Testament story, and Lot slept with his own daughters, and his defense was he's too drunk to know what he was doing. And I believe the Bible is absolutely true, and how can Peter be right when he calls Lot righteous? And Peter does pick up the fact that it says his soul was tortured or something like that. And so he's righteous, but it's almost like God has this gracious memory that rather than pulling up all the dirt, he picks the one thing that, and I wonder if God isn't doing the same thing with us, calling us righteous, where if we looked at the gory details of any of our lives, none of us are righteous, but God is in Christ choosing to do this gracious memory. And I think, too, David did have a heart for God, but he prays in Psalm 51, create in me that clean heart. And so he is a man after God's own heart, but why is he a man after God's own heart? Could it be because God is giving him grace instead of giving him what he deserved? But kudos to you. You pegged me in terms of that is the most difficult question for someone who holds my position, because it seems to run counter to some obvious statements in the Old Testament. But I'm certain this isn't the first time we'll have this delightful conversation. So well done, my friend, and keep up the good questions. All right, well, that's what I have for you. I hope you enjoy the evening, get to watch the Braves game, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys.
Good night, Doc.
Good night. Thank you, Antonio.